wanted to talk about the first two books that I read this month. The first two I got through really quickly. I'm currently on the third book, and it's taking a little while. I think from where I am so far in the third book that I'm reading, which is The Wonderling, it's probably the one I'm enjoying the most, and I'm taking my time the most with it. But I will talk about that kind of when I review that book. Today, I'm just going to be focusing on the first two books I read, which was Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend, and The Polar Bears Explorer Club by Alex Bell. Now, these two books for me were kind of different ends of the spectrum of what I was expecting throughout this month of reading children's literature. And even though they have kind of loosely similar themes in the fact that they are both like sort of fantastical books, and they are similar ideas in that the main character is a girl who there is more to her than meets the eye, and she sort of discovers this throughout the journey that she takes, which is ultimately the plot of the book. So I enjoyed them both. I enjoyed one more than the other. For Nevermore, I gave this a 4.5 stars. I think of all the books that I was talking about, this was the one I was most excited about, just because of the way others have spoken about it on YouTube before. Now for me, I was very nervous when I first started reading this book because the first 100 pages are a little bit slow, and I was like worried that I wasn't going to be enjoying it as much. The first 100 pages are kind of set in one world, and the journey for our main character is that she then goes into Nevermore. So the first part in the first world kind of frustrated me a bit because nothing was getting explained, and I felt that that was a time when we needed to actually really know the world that she was in / would be leaving. Because whereas nothing was getting explained, it was still 100 pages long, so you're kind of like, well, what was the point of spending so much time there? They definitely like sort of laid the scene for the reason why Morrigan Crow felt the way she did, and then why going into Nevermore would impact her the way it did. We got that, but there was just no explanation of the reasoning behind Morrigan Crow being treated in a very specific way. Nor was there any explanation on sort of how this belief system within this original world kind of was brought about. We did get a few explanations later on in the book because it was meant to be a sort of discovery, but there wasn't enough that really made me aware of what kind of the original world was about, and then why Nevermore was so different and was so special. But I will say that once you then got into Nevermore, the story picked up, the pace picked up, and I was drawn into it, and I ended up reading like the last, I don't know however many pages it was, last 350 or something pages within one sitting, and I was just gobbled up by the story, and I really enjoyed it. The plot follows Morrigan Crow kind of joining this wondrous society, and in order to do so, she had to pass these sort of trials, and she's kind of sponsored by this man called Jupiter North, who has his own sort of secrets, and he has his own plans of what is happening and what is going on, and as the story develops, we kind of see what's up and why Morrigan Crow is the way that Morrigan Crow is. Now, I did expect this from a children's book, and I guess, you know, you can't fault it for that. You know exactly what's going to happen. You can see everything that's going to kind of unravel and everything that's going to kind of fit into place. There are such heavy clues throughout that it just doesn't have any plot twists. But there was one plot twist that I didn't see coming, and it's a story of a side character, and this side character called Cadence is probably my favourite character of the book, and I really hope we're going to see more of her in the rest of the series, because I loved her, and I loved like the plot twist that was brought about because of her character's arc. And I think that was a really special way of kind of making this book more than just a children's story. And those sort of things are the things that I think adults are going to be looking for and enjoying in books like this. I do think that the references in this book, the language that's used, and the way that the kind of world is developed makes this book for the sort of older end of the 8 to 12 reading age group, I guess. I would probably sell this more to like 11 plus, Mostly just because there are a lot of references to alcohol, actually. But I think just the words that are used, the vocabulary that's developed, and the sort of the way that the plot is driven is for children who are able to grasp kind of more complex language devices and complex sort of thematic motifs throughout the story. But then at the same time, that's also the sort of things that I think an adult will appreciate from reading a children's book. So then I read the Polar Bear Explorers Club. Now this follows the main character who was found as an orphan, and she wants to join her adoptive father on an expedition to the north. But because she is a girl and only men are allowed to go on this expedition, or on expeditions and join the Polar Bear Explorers Club, she kind of believes at first that she's not going to be able to go. Then she does get onto the expedition, and as they journey to the north, the main character and her group of friends, who are also children, are separated from the adults, and they have to then find their way back whilst also documenting their adventures for the Polar Bear Explorers Club. Obviously there is slightly more to it, because that's a very basic premise, but there's not a whole lot more for it. For me, this book is geared up more for like the younger age range than the 8 to 12, so I would probably recommend it for like 7 to 9-year-olds, just because it's very simple. The sentences are in no way complex. They all follow the same structure, which helps to keep the story going for sure. But the way that the vocabulary is used to structure the sentences is to ensure a readability for the sort of younger audience. And also the sort of imagery that is used is definitely geared up for younger people. Think about all of those very typical images that you find in the very popular series that you would find in the 5 to 7 sections. So like there's the Rainbow Fairies. It's all very much that sort of vein within this book, which I guess is a nice sort of bridge for children who are used to reading those sort of series into getting into the older sort of chapter books and thicker sort of stories. I didn't enjoy this one so much. I gave this book 3 stars, not just because it was simple, although the simplicity did hinder it a little bit, but also just because of its absolute fluffy nature, in which everything was just very easy. There were no risks and there were no problems which weren't overcome within the next sentence. I think there could have been a lot more sort of danger put into this story and a lot less focus on, I want to say, gender stereotypically feminine images. So I think, you know, the main character, who is meant to be this strong young girl who wants to break into the man's world, is still very much perpetuating overtly feminine stereotypes. And there isn't a balance of any other female characters to counteract that. She's actually the only girl character in the entire book. Everyone else is a man or a boy, but there was just not enough balance within that. There was one character who was obviously autistic, and it was never very much explicitly said, but I think it's delivered in a really beautiful way that actually little children will be able to understand and learn compassion about, which will help them in interacting with their classmates who might also have similar issues, which I found really touching. Well, I must say, whilst I kind of did think that you were able to tell exactly what was going to happen in this book, there was a plot twist in the epilogue which had me a little bit shooketh, and has made me want to kind of read the second one to see where that's going to go and what this plot twist is going to be about. But also, there was a massive plot twist which you knew was going to happen from like the word go. It had like no impact on the main character's life, even though it was such a life-changing and such a dramatic plot twist. The character's just like, okay, and then carried on with her life as normal. And I just felt a little bit deflated because I felt it might have misjudged the ability for children to understand deeper impacts of kind of events that happen within their lives. So both these books, when reading them, kind of made me think of the compass that you see in the Wayward Children series. Last month I read Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire, and that's about children who come back from these magical worlds. And there's a compass that is used to describe like where these magical worlds sort of lie in terms of their structure. And two sides of the compass are sort of a logical world or a nonsense world. And so when I was reading these books, it definitely made me think about this whole logic and nonsense. The sort of logical world, I guess, would be something a bit like Harry Potter, in which, whilst there is magic, there is a very strict logic that helps the magic work. And there are rules and there are laws in place, and there's ways that magic can't do things because of the sort of the laws of magic, which creates this very logical system which allows the reader to kind of know exactly what's what, and when things don't fit in to that logic, it gets uncomfortable, it gets tricky, and then, you know, it becomes a little bit harder for the audience to suspend their disbelief. Whereas on the nonsense side, it's like there are no rules, anything can happen. And I feel with these two books, these were very much nonsense worlds, which is absolutely fine, and I think I was expecting it from sort of all of the books that I was going to be reading. But the sort of the nonsense nature, in some ways, made it quite difficult for you as a reader, and I would wonder whether it would be the same for a child reader to kind of get on board with absolutely everything that happens. Both of them have magic within these books, yet both of them don't really have any magic systems. It just seems to be to suit the plot, that what something needs to happen, that magic exists for that to happen. And at times I was a little bit frustrated, especially when there were no explanations, or where things just seemed very random and the characters didn't question it in any way. And I mean, sure, it could be the fact that I just would like a little bit more explanation because I'm an adult and perhaps my imagination isn't as strong as it once was. But also at the same time, I think children grow up learning the world, grow up learning the rules of how everything works. It's like this constant thing that's going on as their sort of understanding of the world around them is formed. And whilst they do have such strong and vivid imaginations, I mean, not all children, but some do, and they are able to create sort of drawings of a unicorn zebra with a machine gun for a tail. Don't know why that came to my head, but whilst they are able to create that because there are no limits on their imagination, I think when you are reading books, I have found in my experience of reading books to children, they're always asking questions. They always want to know why that happens, and why is that way and stuff, and why is this character feeling this way. So there is space for a child to want some form of logic, or to have some sort of structure in place which allows them to comprehend why things are happening the way they are. I don't know whether it's this whole sort of authors misunderstanding their audience, or whether it's just because there is a limited amount of space and words that you can put into a children's novel, or whether it is just for fun, to not be questioned and to be just enjoyed as is. It's hard to tell kind of the intentions behind it, and I definitely enjoyed these books, and I think I will continue on with the series of both of them, but I am hoping that as the series develops there will be a sort of a more mindful approach to explaining sort of things that happen, rather than them just always being so random. But I guess at least it is a consistent randomness. So I guess there's always that, which in some ways could be a logic of itself. So those are the first two books that I read, and I would definitely recommend Nevermore. The Polar Bears Explorers Club, I would probably only recommend it to like specific people who might want something very easy, very mindless, and something that kind of gives them those happy childhood memories, maybe. But I don't think it would be for everyone, especially not everyone who watches my channel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry about any dodgy lighting. It's a bit of a grey day and clouds just keep coming over. But anyway, I'll see you soon for another video. Bye bye.